Yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing about the ketamine trips is I've never really been on acid before, and it
Mhm.
was just the things that go through your head.
Oh,
It's just
I
like
hadn't either until I did the ketamine. I never done psychedelic until I. Yeah, it's nuts.
I tried some acid back in the '80s when I was in the army. And it was nothing like this, boss. I mean, it was just like the colors and everything. Um, and I truly looked forward. I started looking forward as I felt I was gaining some momentum. I look forward to those treatments. I do. I do one a month now, and I just did one, and a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and so I'm going to keep on schedule. I think they do work. All right, cool.
Sweet.
Yeah,
All right,
do this.
let's do it. Bruce Parkman is back on the 38 Challenge podcast. First time we did this, didn't have the setup we do now, but to remind the audience, Bruce is a retired Sergeant Major, Special Forces, serial entrepreneur, president of the Mac Parkman Foundation, advisor for the 38 Challenge, and just one of the best men that I know. And Bruce, I've been super excited for this, man.
Hey, man, thanks for the unbelievable introduction. I don't think I deserve that, but I appreciate it, Brant. Thanks.
Yeah, man.
I've been looking forward to this too. I love coming to Dallas.
Hell yeah. Yeah, we are in an unfortunate club together, and that's kind of how we got connected. Bruce lost his son, Mac, to suicide, and since then has created the Mac Parkman Foundation, which is really just raising much needed awareness, funding, advocacy for sub-concussive trauma, especially in our youth, and how it is leading to mental illness. So, yeah, man, obviously we have a bond that I wish upon no one, but just is awesome to always be able to spread awareness. So why don't you kind of talk about what y'all got going at the Mac Parkman Foundation?
Well, Brant, the last time we talked, we were just kind of getting to know each other. I think that was when you actually interviewed me on your whole mission of getting guys to open up and not be afraid of the stigma of mental illness, and to I recognize, identify it, and of course we'll have a long conversation about that because I just ended up dealing with that recently.
Yep.
But we've been getting a lot done. We got the book published, so our book is out now. It's #1 from what we understand on Amazon, because there's nothing out there for parents. Kind of, it's pretty easy to be #1 when there's no other books in your niche, right?
Yeah, 101.
But there are a lot of parents reading it now.
Yeah, tell us about the book and how kind of that whole process.
Yeah, the book's called Broken Brains in Contact Sports, and the genesis of the book, of course, was the aftermath of my son's death. Was sitting around just wanting to die, just not wanting to be here no more. Could not find any happiness. My wife, I was all alone. My stepson, who was and you've met Parker, Mac's best friend, who ended up joining the Army, had left.
Sparky.
And I was doing great, and says hi, by the way.
Good.
Yeah, talked to him yesterday.
Nice.
And I was all alone, and I was just wrestling with, why is my son not here? Why, number one, didn't he tell me he was hurting? And talking about mental illness, and then just what was this whole CT thing about? And so I just started reading and understanding that my son did have one or two, I'd say not red flags, more like pink, like he was apathetic. The problem was that these flags were also what I associated with just a young man growing up, spending less time with his family, like in his room dark, because he could play his video games, which could have been light noise sensitivity, and then not really wanting anything, not caring about anything, which was apathy. But I'm thinking, he's just a teenager, right? I never had a teenage boy. And, so I was like, Why is he not here? And I just started reading up on mental illness. And I know that in the video he left, what I focused on was he was, depressed. And I could see now that looking back that, he wasn't, what I thought was a teenage boy growing up was a young man that was distancing himself.
Well, and I think, and it's the same thing that I experienced with Matt. Like, you don't understand the red flags or the pink flags or the signs a lot of the times until it's too late. And now it's our mission to educate other people. And now when I see friends who I can, or people who I can tell who are going through depression because I've been through it and because I've seen my brother go through it, now it's like it's still not like, oh, like you're clearly depressed, but it's like you now have these signs because you've been through it, you've experienced it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm seeing it in my friends now where I never would have noticed it before, and I'm concerned about them, and I'm, telling them to go see somebody or talk to somebody. And so when I started focusing on the causes of depression and that whole thing for contact sports, when the coroner said, "Hey, did your son play contact sports?" Focusing on the contact sports, but more on the diagnosis of schizophrenia and depression, and then reading about brain trauma and schizophrenia and depression, it became so clear. I mean, to me, and I'm not a doctor. And what's appalling about this is that the research is absolutely clear that brain damage and mental illness are inextricably linked. Big word, small brain, but they're unbelievably linked, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's factual. And I'm like, and then I started looking at the types of brain damage that are associated with contact sports to find out that they are the same. Damage to, and the areas of the brain that are affected with are associated with mental illness are known to be those areas of brain affected by contact sports. We have heard about prefrontal cortex damage for years and damage to the temporal lobes. And I'm like, dude, this is like black and white. This is like so clear. I can see clearly now the rain is gone. And I'm like, well, I'm just an old sergeant major. In my opinion, nobody has ever died from CTE. They have not died from the amyloids or the tau proteins or whatever those characteristical damage. CTE is a disease, and it is a disease of the brain, and it can be diagnosed postmortem, yada, yada. But the problem is, to me, the damage, the CTE is not associated with damage to the prefrontal cortex and temporal lobes. That is what is causing the mental illness that's killing people.
Right.
That is the damage that your brother and my son suffered from. And we need to focus on that. But that was, anyways, long story. That was the genesis of the book, was just, starting to read and research, and I was angry. And then as I read, I got angrier because I'm like, dude, why didn't I know this? I know my son shouldn't be driving without a seatbelt. I know he shouldn't have been snowboarding without a helmet. And I fixed all. I know he shouldn't be smoking, dope or doing drugs. I fixed all that, But I couldn't fix this. I didn't have information. I didn't have knowledge. Society didn't inform me. And then I started getting angry as I started thinking of all the kids that are still playing. Now, I know why my son's not here. I know why many, many kids are not here. And it's just so angry. I'm so angry right now that I can't watch football. I'm watching young men who are risking it all for a career and the fame and the glory, which they should. I mean, that is so appealing, right? It's like, God, I can't wait to be out there on the big screen, right? And making millions. But did their parents know that their outcomes later on in life are not going to be good for the most part? And that's what, you can make a calculated risk at any time. We're adults. You want to smoke, you want to drink, you want to do this, great. But when you're a child, you're innocent. And our mission here on earth, as ordained by God, the Lord, is to take care of our children. They're His children, right? And if you're not religious, then as a parent, you should be taking care of your kids. And we're not doing that. And I just, I'm very angry about it.
Yeah. 100%. And I think, CTE is obviously a real issue, but I think when the term is used so many times, it's kind of, a lot of people think it as like a death sentence. It's like when I talk to people, it's like, I'm going to get CT. There's nothing I can do about it. And right now that might be the case. However, with mental illness and with mental health, you might develop CT down the road, right? You might experience depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation because of the contact sports that you played for X amount of years, right? But there are things that are out there that can help address depression, that can help address anxiety, you can understand that your thoughts are just thoughts and they don't have to be, your actions. And these are by raising the awareness that you are with mental health and mental illness, we can start to treat some of these byproducts of what the concussions are causing, right? And people can understand that they have an injury to the brain, and like we say so many times, they're not crazy. And I think, one of your big points is that, you don't necessarily, you still play rugby. You don't hate contact sports. You just think that, and I totally agree. And I haven't found many people out there who would disagree that just wait until your child is in high school, till he's, 14 years old, to play contact sports, given that he understands the risks. Similarly to doing drugs, right? I remember growing up, people would come in with the, don't do drug shirts, and they tell you about them. Kids still do drugs. They know exactly what they're going to do to them. But, it's that. And there's so many great things that contact sports provide for people, but they don't need to happen while your brain is in its most developmental stage, and they need to be aware of the consequences that might happen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think the issue with my issue with CT, no problem, but nobody else's issue with CT. My issue with CT is that the way it's been defined and the way it's been treated has misled the population, to include parents, to think that this is an NFL players or a NHL players, or it's a professional player's disease, and it's not going to impact my kid because he'll never be that professional player. Well, that's wrong. I mean, all that CT, all that damage to the brain started when those professional athletes, most of them, I can't find any of them that didn't play in high school or played even earlier or played multiple sports, started. And you're right, it's not about anti-contact sports. I love contact sports, man. I mean, we were supposed to play in the Maggot Fest this weekend. Me and my buddies were talking. We said, we're in the bleachers. We're in the digital bleachers. Everybody's sending pictures, and they're out just getting drunk, having a great time playing rugby. And it's like, man, I miss that so much. And some of my buddies, I've known them for 40 years. They're such great guys. And I still love it. I still love the camaraderie, because outside of the military, it's the only brotherhood I've ever known. Mm-hmm. And there's a place for it, but not with children. Not with a child's brain. Now that we know, and it's just unforgiving that we've known about this issue, and we say, it affects an adult's brain. We look at adults and at college athletes above, and if we can accept the fact that contact sports is damaging an adult's brain, why the hell do we not correlate that damage with a child and think it could be even worse? Because a child's brain is developing, it's growing. It's developed, and by leaps and bounds. And it is the only thing our child has for the rest of its life. That brain determines who they are, what socioeconomic status they attain, the type of person they will be. It's all they have. And yet we're willing to risk it, in our ignorance right now. But if you're a parent that knows, and there's a couple of people out there that I'm really upset at, that know that this happens, and they still allow their kids to play contact sports. Yet they know intimately that this issue exists.
Right.
And so
and there's so many athletes, NFL players, who are saying there's no need for your child to play until he's 14. You can learn the skills, even if you're a lineman. If you're a bigger kid, you can play 7-on-7. You don't need to throw a helmet on. You don't need to bang heads. Like the skills the camaraderie, the skills, the discipline, that can all be taught without slamming your head into a wall. And I think that is it's an easy thing that would save so many people's lives, and we just have to keep fighting that fight. And it's the same thing. I mean, I talked to a guy the other day who I connected you with, but I never enjoy those conversations when you talk to someone who lost any family member to suicide. But the first question I asked him was, because he was talking about his son, and I didn't even know anything about his son. I said, "Did your son play sports?" He said, "He wrestled. He was a starter on varsity as a sophomore playing football." And I said, it sounds like you want to honor your son by spreading awareness and helping other people. And I said, I don't know if you know this, and I spoke about, what concussions can do to a developing brain and all these certain things. And, you could just hear he just kind of paused. And similar to your story, it just probably doesn't make it better at all, but it makes it make more sense. And I think that, and it's the same thing with the military, so much trauma to the head, whether that be from training, whether it be from breaching doors, from, combat training, from deployments, whatever it is, you're getting so much exposure and so much trauma to your brain. And it's a problem that in the military community we're not addressing either.
No, I mean, I started the Green Beret Foundation. When I say start, I was one of the first 12 guys, the first ODA. And I donated some money to get it going. And back then, even then, we all thought that our guys were struggling because they've seen combat, because they saw dead bodies. We never even remotely considered the fact that they might have had brain injuries. And that oversight by the VA, by the veterans community, and it's not on purpose, right? It's just that it takes time for some, reality to hit. And so since the war started, I mean, how many veterans have, and not just the war, just in training, like our EOD suicide rate is unbelievably through the roof. Yet we've never looked at what an EOD guy or girl does. They're around explosives all the time. They're blowing shit up every other day, multiple days, right? And we finally came to the realization that we have these anti-tank weapons called Carl-Gustavs, and when them things go off, man, they rock. I've never shot one. I've talked to guy. I'm an older soldier, man. We had like law rockets, but they had to limit them because of just the headaches, right? The guys that were complaining. Well, just think, I talked to guys. I said, man, we used to shoot 20 a day because we didn't want to take them back and give them back in. So we've got veterans walking around right now, and as I said, I just got diagnosed with general anxiety disorder as a result of mild TBI or repeated head injury by the VA, and they're just starting. And I had to educate this guy a little bit, and he's like, "Well, I think you need to take a look at my brain," And he's like, "Well, why would you say that?" It's like, "Well, I did all this stuff." And I said, "I'm not." He said, "You have concussions." I'm not talking about. I had concussions. I'm talking about my lifestyle that the military allowed me, that I wanted to do, right? I wanted to be around those explosions and bullets and jumping out of planes and cracking my noggin and playing military rugby. I wanted that. That I know it was, eventually the concussions, that's all I used to worry about. I'll pay for these things one day. But they're starting to now look at it. But it's 2023, boss. Brant, we started this war in 2001. Right? That's 23 years. Millions of veterans have been over there, and millions of veterans have served that haven't made in combat zones, but live highly subconcussive lifestyles. What are we doing? How do we measure that subconcussive trauma to get them to change careers after a certain amount of time? Like we do with radiation. You can only absorb so many rads in a nuclear factory, and you have to move to another position because you're done. You've had all the damage your body can sustain. And I think that, it's awesome that we're now starting to address it, but we are way late to this fight, man. And the other part is that these veterans, like, the ketamine treatments and the psychedelics that we're talking about, most of these veterans do not know that this could be a cause of their problem. Mm-hmm. So just like these athletes that are harming themselves, they don't have a reason, like they're mission driven. They want to solve a purpose, solve a goal. Like you're trying, you're solving your grief through this unbelievable organization that you created and is spreading awareness about your brother. Okay. If you have an injury, then you're going to do what you need to fix it. But these people don't know. And it's a shame.
Yeah, it really is. And that's always been just a massive part of our mission as we continue to grow, just understanding, mental health, mental illness, brain health, whatever you want to call it, more. It really is an injury to your brain, and sometimes you might not be able to fix all of the concussions and all the blast exposure that you've had, but there's things like neuroplasticity, right, where you can create new pathways in your brain. So maybe you're not the same, your brain's not the same as it was, but it can function much better, right? And you can have new coping mechanisms that aren't pills and aren't alcohol and aren't, abuse or suicidal behavior. And these things can be taught and these things can be learned, and you can go try psychedelics, right? And you can go try SGB, and there's so many things that are out there. And like you said, once people understand, hey, this is the problem, this is what I'm dealing with, and these are ways to go out and solve it, then they have their mission and they can go out and complete that mission, right? Instead of locking themselves in and isolating and thinking that they're crazy or letting people down, because that's what happens. And so I'm curious, man, because, and we'll get into my experience, but first I really want to hear about yours, because I remember I called you when I was going through my dark spot and my dark place, and you were going through yours as well. So why don't you kind of walk me through what was going on with your anxiety? I guess we'll start there. Kind of that dark spot that you were in just a few months ago.
Yeah, I mean, it all happened. I think it's been building up for a while, and I just didn't realize it. Like, it was just culmination of grief, and then I had, COVID, shingles, and then in January, I just started having these unbelievable.
And you also run you have a very stressful business.
Yeah, you can say that, man. I'm all over the place, and and then my son, and they're saying all my childhood and all this, then all the military stuff, but there's just a lot of stress that accumulates, and you just deal with it. And my way to deal with it was just to keep my business going, drinking, and just not drinking excessively, but drinking socially,
right,
and have as much fun as I can, and still every day crying, honoring my son. Well, I mean, in January, I just didn't feel right, and I went to the hospital, and I said, look, I did not feel good. I was diagnosed with AFib, which I'll blame on my damn stepson, because we drank like Vikings over Christmas, and he put me into what's called holiday heart.
Sparky,
yeah. We were, we had a lot of fun. And then they said, oh, my blood pressure's through the roof. And I'm like, well, I just don't feel, I was all itchy.
yeah, dude, like your skin was crawling.
Right. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And I'm like, dude, this don't feel right. Then I started getting worried that it was something physiological. And so they said, so they kept me overnight. But as soon as I was in the hospital, and I had no business, no phone, and I had a book, man, my blood pressure was like probably yours, like, 120 over 70 or something like that, right? So like, all right, you're okay. So they gave me some pills, I left. About a week later, man, I was just, I just didn't feel right. My blood pressure was continuous uptight. And because I didn't know anything about panic attacks or anxiety, I was flipping out that I was having much more serious problems. So my blood pressure never went down, and I kept looking at it, which made it worse, right? Like, damn. So a week later, I'm like, honey, I do not feel right. Something's wrong. My blood pressure is high. And I was talking to some guys. I started getting tightness in my throat. All high blood pressure, all stress-related, all panic attacks, whatever. But I didn't know it. Went to the hospital, spent 3 days in the hospital. Every test you can run. My entire time in the hospital, my blood pressure was 120-something over 70. I'm just kicking back. I'm reading and no business. What? So they do EKGs, everything. They just threw me out. As soon as I was outside that hospital, my blood pressure soared through the roof. Right. I'm like, what is going on? And so I had to diagnose myself. Which is crazy, right? I had to go figure out what was wrong with me, because the cardiologist said, there's nothing wrong with you, go. Well, there was something wrong with me. It was my mental health. And I did not know it. And finally, I just started getting in such a deep, dark hole where I couldn't focus on anything, and I was basically useless. And I've got a growing company. I got investors coming. I got all this other stuff. And, with the foundation, and I'm like, what do I do? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go talk to those ganglion block guys. And I just happened to be in Denver, and my daughter's a nurse practitioner of psychiatric meds. And And she said, what's up, Dad? And I was like, honey, I'm just not feeling right. I know you're a shrink doc. Shrink me. Shrink me, man. Tell me what's wrong with me. And she goes, well, I think you've got, I said, I got anxiety diagnosis by the VA. I said, but I've never felt like this. She goes, I think you're having panic attacks. And she mentioned ketamine. She goes, have you ever thought of ketamine? I go, why? What is it? She goes, well, we're getting really good results for anxiety and depression with ketamine. And I was like, and at the same time, I was calling up for about these ganglion blocks. So I had one done last year, and it really helped me with fight or flight mechanisms. Anxiety helped me with PTSD, that kind of stuff. And I said, hey, I need this treatment again. And they immediately asked me if I would like to try ketamine with it. And because my daughter said it, I said, yeah, man, I want to try it. So that's what I was going through. But I didn't know what I was going through. It was, I was in Japan on a trip. The last thing I promised my son was to go to Japan and watch fat guys wrestle.
That's why I wore the shirt.
I love it, dude. Yeah. I was like, yeah, dude. And I got a bunch of stories, and I had a great time. Remember my boy with my amazing brother-in-law and both my nephews are amazing. This is the guy, Baylor was with us. It was great. And so, I was walking around this mall, and all of a sudden, man, bam, I was like, oh, I don't feel good. My blood pressure went through the roof. Had no reason why. I had been working that day, but I didn't associate work with stress, right? So I'm just walking through the mall trying to find my wife a gift, and I lost my mind. I got in such a panic attack. I went back, took my blood pressure, and then I started taking it again, and I said, oh, my God, it's going to be over 100. Now I'm going to have to go to crisis mode, and I got to go to the hospital. And I'm in Japan. How am I going to make it home?
Loops, yeah.
Oh, dude, it was crazy.
Yeah.
So anyways, I had to figure out that I was not in a good place, and I need to do something about it. And that's when I signed up for the ganglion blocks and the ketamine treatments.
What did panic attacks feel like for you? Because they're different. I mean, for me, there's, dude, like, yeah, feels like for me, it's like your skin is crawling, like there's ants on it, and I would get ringing in my ears, and like, oh, dude, it's gnarly, man.
Yeah, for me, it was I figured like a panic attack, you'd be just like panicking.
Yeah, right? Like this or something. Yeah, right.
Breathing. It was like, I just had like this massive adrenaline dump. And then the blood pressure went up, and I felt flush in my face, dizzy in the head, like really compressed in the head, man. And then your worries start kicking in. And I usually don't worry about too much, but here I am in Japan, away from my wife.
Dude, it's that.
If I'm gonna die, I'd like to die home.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast, because that's like one of the things that I felt with panic is like just how quickly your mind goes to doom, and like I'm gonna literally I'm literally gonna die. Like it's like, where did that come from? Like how did that get there? For people who haven't gone through panic attacks, I mean, it's just.
And you're thinking, I'm going to die, and you are a healthy 22-year-old kid with no reason to die, right?
Yeah. And then you start Googling, like, why am I? And then it's like, oh, my gosh, like, I've got cancer, or like.
Dude, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's for anyone who's going through mental health, it's like, when they're listening to this, they're like, oh, my gosh, that's exactly what I'm going through right now. It's like, dude.
And then it spikes on everything, because it's like, how's it going to affect my wife, my kids? I mean, I'm ready to die. I've been ready to die for a long time. I know I'm going to see my son again. I'd like to get this mission done. I'm always asking God for some more time. I'm like, look, God, if I'm going to die, and I'm in the middle of a panic attack, it's like, all right, God, can I just have like another year? Because I really got to finish. I got to get this legislation passed, right? And you start making these deals with the Lord. Just keep me around just a little bit. And that goes back, and we'll talk about some of the resolution I did in my ketamine treatment. But yeah, those panic attacks without knowing what they are. And then once I said, all right, it's a panic attack, I was like, all right, I got medication for that. I got Xanax or whatever I got. Right. I'm just going to calm myself down. And that's when I started working on binaural beats, meditation. I'm like, all right, now I have, see what we talked about before. Once you have a problem that's identified, now I'm going to fix that damn thing, right? I got a panic attack. I got anxiety. Okay. Well, I got some hydroxine, which is like a big Benadryl. Lowers your blood pressure, puts you to sleep, but it calms you down. It's like, I'm going to take some hydroxine. I'm going to go drink a beer. And now I know what I got. And now I'm like, all right, now I'm angry. All right, you ain't going to beat me. Of course, my blood pressure doesn't come down for like 5 hours or some craziness because I'm so amped up. But you can. It's all about identifying the issue, which I didn't identify for a
And
long
that's the hardest because I think medication helps you take it, absolutely. But the hardest work that you're going to do is the work that you're talking about, right? Understanding what is it that I'm going through, and then how do I do the work to help, actually address the root issue and not just like numb it, which I
the
think
hard
is,
work.
yeah, that's the hardest work that you can possibly do. So, man, I'm curious, why don't you take us through your ketamine journey, and I'll go into mine after I hear yours. Yours is more interesting than mine.
I don't know about that, dude.
Oh, dude, it
It
is.
wasn't. I'm like. I feel like I call myself. I'm an astronaut, dude. I'm an astronaut. Well, I didn't know what I was getting into, So I end up in this clinic and go downstairs. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna try this ketamine. Well, nobody prepared me. They didn't tell me you should have music or this or that, so I was kind of behind the times. But the ketamine treatments, I still don't know specifically what they do. All I know is that I have resolved a lot of things through these journeys. And for those of you who have never taken ketamine, you're literally out of your body. It's scary at first because if you're like me, you don't like to give up control. But I've been practicing holistic stuff with my wife's a yoga instructor, and I believe in a lot of non-traditional medicines that really help people. So this to me was a little bit easier to go with. It took me about one or two treatments. I fought it a little bit, and but and my first treatment was absolutely elational, man. I was like, saw the beginning of time, I saw my son a lot in that thing. It was just a lot of euphoric stuff, which was pretty good. Maybe it was the music, I don't know, but it never happened again. So I went back thinking, what's up? And I had some really dark journeys, and I realized that those dark journeys were also necessary to deal with my guilt and to deal with my sense of shame and to deal with the fact that I am just a speck of dust here, and I don't mean anything, and that I was truly ready to die. I mean, I died on two of those ketamine trips in my mind. I was like, you know what, Lord, take me. I'm done. I am comfortable now with death, and
Not like I want to die, but like not afraid of it.
not afraid of it. I
Yeah.
literally just froze. And one of them I was just like buried, and the other one I was like in some ice, and I just like, you know what, and I just pictured myself dying, like I'm dead. I'm dead. I'm enveloped in this blue ice, and I'm not getting out, and I don't care anymore. I just want to go. But as I went along in these journeys, I started making connections that I never made before, and understanding that in my mind I was letting my, like, for one thing is I definitely confirmed my Christianity and my relationship with the Lord. um, I truly love my wife, and with my son, that I was absolutely letting him down by crying every day and grieving and snotting and doing all this stuff that it hurts. It hurts to think about him, and I thought that by hurting, I was honoring him because I deserve this grief. I'm part of the reason he's not here, and
Mm.
I deserve this pain and this discomfort and this just unbelievable, just pain that I go through. Um, and in one trip, I said, I started seeing a lot of camouflage, and I'm like, you know what? About the only good thing I've ever done in my life is soldier, and I'm not soldiering for my son. And I need to stop crying and grieving and get on with my mission, which is to create awareness in our parental training, coaching, medical and psychiatric communities that we're harming our children, and
Mhm.
we need to stop this. And since then, I cry very rarely, but I now, by doing the work, I'm honoring my son instead
Mhm.
of being in pain. And I realize that my son, your brother, they don't want to see us hurt. They don't want to see us in pain. They made their decisions, and I think by dealing with my son the way I am now, he's happier, and I definitely am. So it's,
How was your? Because you did that, and then you did the stellate ganglion block.
yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing about the ketamine trips is I've never really been on acid before, and it was just the things that go through your head.
Oh,
it's just
I hadn't either until I did the ketamine. I never done psychedelic until I. Yeah, that's nuts.
I tried some acid back in the 80s when I was in the Army. It was nothing like this, boss. I mean, it was just like the colors and everything. And I truly looked forward. I started looking forward as I felt I was gaining some momentum. I look forward to those treatments. I do one a month now, and I just did one, and a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago, and so I'm going to keep on schedule. I think they do work. But then I went for the stellate ganglion block, and the reason the doc sent me there is they said that your fight or flight mechanism, and you heard Clint talk about his buddy had his fourth one.
Mm-hmm.
Your fight or flight mechanism, sometimes just doesn't close, and it's due to stress. It's due to, it could be grief. It could be, just bad memories. Could be a bad job. Could be a bad marriage, and you just can't. Could be financial pressures, and you just can't get off, and you can't close that. And what that does over time is it creates anxiety, depression, and everything that I was dealing with as well. So I mean, it was a pretty amazing. It's an outpatient procedure. They put you in this hospital bed. You wait. This is the longest part, waiting. You're wheeling in there, and they put you on anesthesia. And my gig with anesthesia is I always try to stay awake.
Right.
I had a hernia operation. All right, I'm going to remember everything here. And then bam, you're just as soon as they sink that plunger, you're gone.
Right.
And you wake up like 15 minutes later, and then they just inject lidocaine into the ganglion nerve pocket, or the nerve group that lies here in the intersection of the neck and and your collarbone, in that pocket there. And between that and the ketamine, it's been night and day, man. I mean, I've never I felt the mental health. Well, I did. I got anger and rage, from my childhood, whatever. But I never thought about mental health in that regard. And honestly, Brant, the way I feel now compared to the way I felt, in February, I mean, I'll never be Pac-Man again, and it's just been too much going on in my life. But it has been night or day. It really has helped. It's helped, and I think you're doing a very, very important job in spreading awareness, of the possibility of this treatment, more or less. So how were your trips, man? I mean, you're a fellow astronaut too.
Yeah, I am 100%. Yeah, so I was going through, and by the time that this is recorded, I would have already talked about. I talked to Clint. We had an episode. Talked about what I was going through, not to the whole extent, which will happen later once I'm through it. But the listeners know, like, I was going through my pretty gnarly depression, anxiety, and I called you, and you could hear my voice, like my voice on the phone.
You were gone, bro.
Dude, we were way different than what I sound right now.
Oh yeah, you were obviously in a lot of pain.
Yeah,
a lot of
pain, a lot of pain, and you were like, dude, I think you should go try these ketamine treatments. And you paid for me to go out to Chicago and try these ketamine treatments. And from the bottom of my heart, you're just that kind of guy. But again, thank you so much for that. For me, you talk about anesthesia. I feel like what it felt like for me is like the feeling right when you get anesthesia and you're trying to fight that. That's what it felt like. Because ketamine is an anesthesia. That's what I felt like throughout the whole thing, like the actual body feeling, which I thought was interesting. For me, I think especially my first couple ones, I was expecting too much because I heard your stories and I was expecting to see Matt and talk. So I think I had those expectations that I had to let go. And I had a panic attack during my first. I had a panic attack during my first ketamine treatment, but I think that's looking back at it, I think that's an important part. And doing research on psychedelic treatment, that anxiety that you face in the beginning, that you're supposed to work through it, because in life, you're never not going to have stress and anxiety, but you have to, like we've been talking about, you have to have healthy coping mechanisms to move forward through it, or else you're just going to be debilitated, which is where I was at, right? And so, and also just the gnarly depression, which is, I mean, just you can't even put in words what that.
You were suffering, man.
Yeah,
I
dude.
mean, it was so evident, and
Yeah.
I was very worried.
Right.
I was extremely worried, and I prayed a lot for you and about you, hoping that you could come to terms and deal with this and feel better. Because I've known you a little while now, or a couple of years, and you're one of the most driven people I've known. You're always optimistic. You're always trying to help folks. You're a very generous human being, and you don't deserve at this age to be dealing with this, crap. And I was, fervently hoping. I mean, I tossed ketamine out just because I knew it helped me, and I was, hoping that, and just that you would just do something instead of, hurt.
Right. Well, and I think so. For me, realizations that I had during ketamine, I also felt every single treatment. I felt a connection to God, and it strengthened my faith as well. That was ketamine's hard. It's a really hard experience to try to
Hey, man.
Well, it's like it's hard unless you try it. It's truly really hard to put words to the experience, but you're not in control of your own thoughts. It's more like a subconscious thing, and it's like you can steer it in the direction, but like your thoughts, it's not. I'm gonna stop trying to explain it, but
you never know it's gonna come up.
Well, yeah, but what I will say is, like, I felt just how, like you said, little we are, and how really our mission on this earth is to help other people, right? And just to bring people closer to Christ, and for us to try to be more like Christ. Like, these are the kind of thoughts that I was having during my trip. And also, I was wrestling with this feeling of, like, how much of the 38 challenge, and I told you this, how much of the 38 challenge has been for myself, and how much has it been for Matt, and how much has it been for other people? Like, has this been a selfish endeavor? Because when you're dealing with depression, your mindset, everything that you think and everything that you see and everything that you experience is through the lens of depression, right? So you don't look at it, you look at it through a sick lens, right? So I was like, you've only done this. It was so self-deprecating. You've only done this for yourself, for your own. And what the ketamine helped me realize is, like, listen, you did this to honor your brother. You're doing this to honor your brother. You're doing this to help other people. And then that helped me realize, like, okay, like.
And people were telling that everybody you talked to, including me, were telling you, look, man, you've done the right thing. You've just done so much. You would not give yourself a break, bro.
No, and that's what, looking back at it, like, I was taking a piss this morning, and I was thinking, like, what, like, who was that person that was thinking these thoughts? Like, it's so crazy. Just the different, it gives me chills, because it's like, it felt like it wasn't me.
It wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
It was not you.
Yeah, and so, but anyways, that was one of the realizations, and others, that I need to be kinder on myself, and that this is a lifelong thing. If I choose to embark on this mission, that this is lifelong. Not everything needs to happen in a day.
Mm-hmm.
But I left that, honestly, like, thinking, like, shit, that didn't help that much. But then then reflecting back on it, and also where I was 2 weeks after, like, I don't know what happened. So you talked earlier about what ketamine does to the brain, and for the people listening, I'm not a scientist by any regards, but from the research that I've done, a typical SSRI, right, is allowing more serotonin to be created in your brain, right? So what the ketamine does is it deals with your glutamate and your GABA receptors, which is a completely different mechanism than SSRIs are. So it's impacting a different part of your brain, which is why they're seeing better results in trials, about 70% effectiveness, whereas an SSRI is about 30%. effective. Yeah. So
Wow.
I mean, the science behind it is crazy. Regardless of your experience, and this is what I had to keep reminding myself, because I didn't necessarily love the ketamine trip, but regardless of the experience, that change in your brain is still happening. You're still, new neural connections are still being made. The neuroplasticity after treatment is like, I don't know what, like I said, I'm not a scientist, but it's significantly increased, meaning the way that your brain is communicating to each other is enhanced. Way different than the typical SSRI, right? So regardless of your experience, your brain is still undergoing change. And I mean, my anxiety, my depression from realizing, I think what we talked about, just some like underlying issues and other things that were going on with medications and that kind of stuff. And then me working out like a maniac, doing ice therapy has been super helpful for me. The ketamine, openly talking about my experiences, meditation, healthy diet. Like, ketamine is not going to solve the issue, right? But it's a tool to allow you to start to make the decisions that will put you in a better place, which is exactly what, it did for you as well.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, it was in zero sum. It was positive.
Yeah.
Right. It definitely was a net positive experience, and I resolved quite a few things. I still haven't figured out whether one treatment makes, or maybe I is good enough, or maybe I should go in for another 6. Man, just knock it out again. Right.
Who knows? I think 6 is like you're supposed to get 6 to see the most benefit.
That's the base treatment.
Yeah.
And then they really don't know how often you should do it after that. I mean, the doctor suggested me once a month. Does that mean that the change is, this is all the change that can happen? Can you change more? I don't know. I think it's all based on, I guess too much of anything is not good. Is
right.
Not good. So, but it's yeah. I mean, and now the next question is, is if you and I can look at it, 2 different people with 2 different backgrounds, yet suffering similar problems.
Well, and 2 different experiences. Like, it sounds like yours was your actual experience and journey. You also did more. You took a higher dosage of me. I kind of stayed at the lower baseline, where by the end of it, you were kind of taking more.
It didn't really change too much. As a matter of fact, the lower dosages were much more vibrant. Much more colorful, much more. Yeah, I had better results at the lower dose. Like they just doubled that.
Dude, it literally feels like a roller coaster. Like, that's a good way to describe it, as it feels like a roller coaster.
Yeah, like your body feels like it's actually moving sideways, backwards, up and down. I mean, It is nuts.
I remember one time, one of the experiences that I had is, also, side note, like, we're not saying go do, like, you should never do ketamine recreationally. You should never do it unless you're at a clinic of someone that you've done a lot of research on, and that who you are comfortable with, and it's an awesome setting, and you have good intention, and you are actually really suffering. Like this isn't something you just go and, I want to go do ketamine.
Yeah, it's not to escape. It's not an escape drug. I mean, it can be.
Yeah, like, I was at a point where I was like you said, like, I was in a lot of pain, and like I would have done pretty much anything. And so I was like, fuck it, I'll go to Chicago and do.
I definitely get it recommended by a psychiatrist. I mean, any psychiatrist that talked to you would.
And I talked to my psychiatrist, and he said, I think this is. He said, I don't see the negative. I don't see the negative. I don't see any. A negative side of you going and doing this.
Here's an interesting point. I'd like your comment, like your thoughts on this. Is like, I did one a couple weeks ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the woman stayed like in the room, even though I couldn't see her, and I didn't like that. It impacted my experience, because in that room, even though we were monitored, right, I felt like I could fully experience this procedure without having another human being in there. So I mean, I know for me personally, I don't think I'd like somebody else in the room, even somebody I love, because you're dealing with some very personal stuff, like some very gut-wrenching thoughts, I mean, you get down to the core, the kernel of who you are, and you have to wrestle with some really dark stuff. We all have a dark side. I mean, and you have to wrestle with that to get to the kernel and find the good and find the positive. And that's not. And if your wife or your husband's there or whatever, it's like
Right.
I would feel I personally would not be able to dig as deep as I could if I feel like I'm alone. You know.
I've heard like for me, I was like, Mom, I don't want you in the room. I want to be by myself. That was my decision. I know there's a lot of like studies where I don't know what I feel like you'd have to have a pretty low dose of ketamine. Like there's no way I could have had a conversation. I mean, I don't know about you. There's no way I could have. But what they're doing is I think they're giving low doses of ketamine in like a therapeutic setting because it lets people's guard down so that they can actually open up and really work through the things that are at the core. So I think in the setting that we took, which was IV and at a relatively higher dose, there's no way I could have had a conversation with someone. There's just
no I mean, if it's part of psychotherapy, then that low dose thing might be another way to address it.
Right.
I just know at the dosage we were taking, in order to not enjoy but to let the drug do what it's supposed to do. I personally couldn't have another person in the room. Man.
No, I couldn't have either. Yeah. No. But yeah, so that's my, I think it really depends. But
it might work for some folks.
Yeah. But dude, I will say like I said, a lot of different things, but I'm night and day. Lucas can attest to this. I mean, obviously you can attest.
Oh, I can.
Yeah. Like I'm night and day as well, man. Like in it, but what I will say is that I'm glad that I went through that experience because now you and I can have this conversation. I've tried something that I truly believe will help a lot of people and will be the future of mental health, which is psychedelics and different things. And I'm not like, oh, go take mushrooms and like trip balls. Like I don't believe in that at all. I've never believed in that. Like, I used to smoke pot a lot. Now it makes me anxious, but the research behind it, now I have this like testimony, and you are a testimony, and so many other people are testimonies to, hey, this stuff like actually does work. But I'm glad I went through that depression and that anxiety because now I can have more genuine conversation with people who are going through the exact same thing. And I can talk about what it feels like for your skin to be feeling like there's spiders crawling on it. And I can talk about looking in the mirror and not recognizing who's standing in front of you. I can talk about being in bed and literally not being able to get out of it, right? Which, unless you've experienced it, you can't relate and you can't have empathy for someone going through it right now. And that's what the mission is, man. And so as horrible as that time was, and I hope to God it doesn't come back. I really do.
Yeah.
But now if it does, I'm better equipped to deal with it. And now I can actually tell people, hey, this is what I did. This is what helped me. And that's why we're building out these new programs with the 38 challenges. Like, these are things that have helped me, and it's one thing to tell someone to go ask for help, and it's another thing to, once they do go ask for help, actually have, next steps for them to take.
Well, and the other thing is that, and I think you touched on the other point, is that you've been there and done it. So, you're speaking. That's why I had the confidence to talk to you about ketamine, because I did it, and even though I was in the middle of therapy when you called me, I could feel it, or no, the second time I was back for those 2 treatments.
Well, the first time I called you, you're like, I don't know if this makes you feel any better, but I'm fucked up. I'm doing.
I was in a hole.
Yeah,
bro.
you're like I'm doing. He's like, you're like, bro, I'm in. He's like, put the business on pause, having panic attacks, doing ketamine, and I was like, honestly, it does make me feel a little bit better.
I was a hurting puppy, man, and like you, I'm hoping it doesn't come back, and if and like you said, to your point, I'll be ready for it if it does.
Yeah, and I think that's the scary part, man. Is like, yeah, man, for.
But
yeah,
you're on a good path, and and a lot of the reasons, I guess, one of the reasons I'm pretty confident it won't come back to that level is that I'm resolving the issues that I think caused it in the first place.
Right.
And you're dealing with issues that, we all either hide or don't talk about or don't deal with or don't know they're affecting us. And ketamine does allow you to really look deep, man, and understand that, that for the most part, you're suffering from the stress of doing the right thing. And you're suffering from, like me or just like yourself, is from the actions of others. Your brother and my son, those actions affect us, man. I mean,
Right.
and they're not, our fault. And, I mean, and it's, I don't know, it's just understanding the resolving your relationship with those issues is what has helped me out. And,
Yeah, 100%. And that's understanding just, trauma and how that, like childhood trauma, how that manifests into anxiety and depression later in life. Like, it's not necessarily biological. I mean, there is a biological component of it, but a lot of it is like, what is your personal experience, right? And but I truly believe that there's ways for you to work through it and to live a much better life. You'll probably always deal with, if you're dealing with mental health, you'll always deal with it, but it's like, how do you deal with it in a better way? How do you create systems that allow you to live, a better life, right? And that's kind of what that's the journey I'm on.
I would say, like, almost, I mean, everybody has a mental health problem.
Right.
I mean, it's how they address it, if it's, rage or substance abuse. I mean, we all have it. It's just if it gets to the point like it did with me and you, where it's impacting your ability to live, then that's when, you're not capable of dealing with yourself. You need help.
Yep.
And we all try to deal with things on our own, and nobody wants to admit I got this issue. But you get to a point where you start affecting your relationships with your health of yourself, and you have to do something about it. And we did, and hopefully other people will hear about us and take those same steps. And because there's a lot of good people out there having issues, and we need to help them get on a better path.
100%. Yeah, I think we'll close with this, but. And I've said that I'm glad I went through that experience, and this is why I'm glad, because for us to have the conversation that we just had with Clint, right, where you can have these, and with people we just met, when you start opening up about your mental health experiences and the darkness that you've been through, how you maneuvered through it, the conversations are just, and the conversations, the bonds that are made, like, it's just at a so much deeper level. Like, now I can talk to people and say, this is what I've been through. Like, dude, like, I've been going through that. It's like, oh, so they know exactly, because you speak the same language, right? And it's, if you haven't gone through it, you can't speak that language because you don't know what it's like.
You're speaking a language that other people want to speak but haven't spoke yet. And by opening yourself up, you allow them to, and you allow them to say, hey, it's okay, man. It's okay. And unfortunately, like we talked about, in our warrior communities and our athletic communities, and in a lot of the communities, we are raised to be tough, right, and not to, be vulnerable. Like, and that's one of the purposes of your mission is to teach people that vulnerability is okay. You still be a tough son of a bitch,
dude. Yeah.
But if you're not understanding and recognizing that you're suffering, then thus they unable to do anything about it.
Right.
It's not doing anything.
And I don't won't say who was just in here, but big dudes, college athletes. I feel like maybe this was just me speculating, but like, I feel like I could see it in their eyes too, because they gave the head nod too, where it's they know. And so who knows, maybe they're going through something, and maybe they leave this place and they go get the help that they need. And I think that's what I want people need to understand, is like, you being vulnerable, you asking for help, you talking about your mental health. It is like, we can truly change a society by doing it.
We can.
Yeah.
We have to.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no need for unnecessary pain, and the pain that we're seeing is unnecessary. It can be treated. It can be dealt with. So.
Yeah. Well, I love you, man, very much.
I love you, dude, man. I appreciate you opening up this amazing space, man.
Dude,
if y'all get a chance to see Brant and his patriotic frat house here, man. This,
Yeah, come
this
on out,
thing's
yeah.
amazing, dude.
Yeah.
So come on out and see him. It's a lot more better in person.
Cool. Well, appreciate you, brother.
All right, I thank you. All right, take care.